got to apologize ahead of time because I think I'm about to show you guys some of the most horrifying video I've ever shown. Hold on one second. On my show. On purpose, anyways. There's always been some accidental stuff. Occasionally we're rolling through and we see a picture of, Marjorie Taylor Greene talking or something like that. But within the context of that, there is, you guys know, and welcome to the show, by the way. This is Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide, where I go through the clips they put up and all the way through the clips that they put up. And I don't cherry pick the little pieces that I want to make fun of in people's stuff or take them out of context. They create the context, so my conscience is clear and so is yours. Also, this is a place where you can see a lot of the groundwork on right-wing talking points happening before it balloons out into the general right-wing zeitgeist, right? Many of you know, though, that right before COVID, I was filming a show in China called Explore China, and it was a standard kind of travel show. They needed a host who was funny and spoke Chinese, and there's only one of us. And so I had been going there for months at a time. Like, I'd go for a month, and then I come back, and then I go for another month, and then I go back. And then I'd done that for almost 2 years, and shooting a bunch of stuff. Show just got shelved permanently by the production company in China because China just decided it didn't like foreigners anymore. That's essentially how it works out. That I did I feel like I was doing the last China travel show to entice tourism that was ever made. Hopefully, one time it will, at some point it will come back, but it won't be until Xi Jinping is gone in whatever form he leaves this earth or that regime. It's not until that happens. The idea of doing regular business or regular travel in China like you would any other country, it basically they have just moved into kind of a B grade North Korea situation. And as I came back from that, the impetus for starting this show and going through all these moments with you guys, and going through all the Trump rallies and all the Mike Lindell movies and blah, 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 was because I knew the horror that was coming. I had seen it there. I knew when it got here, it would be terrible. And I was heartbroken by it. And I decided that after I got through my window of heartbreak, I would just spend the rest of my time cheering everyone up and helping people get through it as best I could. And over the course of the last 3 years, I've lost 7 dear friends and a bunch of ancillary close acquaintances and myriad others. That's another story for another time. And I had a lot of friends in China that I lost contact with that, for all practical purposes, evaporated. Their phone numbers no longer work. Their WeChats were shut down. It is hard to know whether it was because of COVID or because the government scooped them up for talking to people outside the country. There's a myriad of frightful reasons why, they might have encountered something, some kind of awful that took them from us. And then there might just be that they, because the writing was on the wall over in China, stopped participating in a lot of normal activities just to get through it, just to survive. So they might have just gotten off of WeChat or stopped talking to anybody outside the country for fear that because somebody like me, would, in an audition for a show where they were asking me if I spoke Chinese, said Taiwan 是一个国家, which means Taiwan is a country, among other things. That wasn't the only thing I said. But so there's reason to believe that it would be smart for some of my friends in China to not talk to me via WeChat and other things for their own safety, because I guarantee I've got a mark, which is sad because I love Chinese culture. I'm a well-known Sinophiliac. I love the Chinese people. It's just their government that is horrifying and awful, and the ginormous support structure of that, which is the number of citizens that support the Chinese Communist Party and its methodology of rule, is it's not even half the country. It's not even half the population. Let's be abundantly clear. Half of the population in China has no interest in cutting itself off from the rest of the world, becoming a domed, environment where they have their own closed-in internet and never being able to travel and all that kind of stuff. Like, half of them are vehemently against it, but keep their mouth shut for fear of the ramifications. But there are enough people that are okay with it or support it that it is by volume equal to the entire population of the United States, if not more. It kind of goes with like Islamists versus just Muslims. In the world of, percentage-wise, the percentage of Muslims that are Islamists who believe in just wiping out the rest of the Western world is minuscule compared to the number of Muslims in the world and is not reflective of the greater Muslim community. However, there's so many Muslims that it's equal to or greater than the entire population of the United States. So there's a lot of those things, all right? Russia's like a similar, smaller version of that in many ways, as far as the population that supports Putin versus doesn't. They're a much smaller country by comparison, but a percentage of them, you're talking, 5 Los Angeleses, right? That would like to nuke Los Angeles. And that doesn't include some of the stand-ups that I know in Los Angeles who bitch about it but never move. So what are you going to do? Anyways, so let me show you something, and I apologize ahead of time. There's footage of this all over the place, but this is a line outside of a crematorium in China. These are, according to China, only, I believe, 19 people have died of COVID in the last month, since, the last 3 weeks since they've opened. This just keeps going down the street. These aren't like medical professionals. These are family members, friends. Can you imagine anything like this in the United States, even at the height of COVID over here? When we had, we had freezer trucks, remember that? But we had enough freezer trucks to make sure that people could be buried or cremated, and they didn't have to sit on the street while their friends, many of whom are sick. If you turn the audio on this clip, you'll occasionally, as they're going down the street, hear people coughing. And it just goes on and on. Look at this. It is heartbreaking. And there's, this is a report on CNN from Selena Wong. But there are, officially less than 10 COVID deaths this month. But at this Beijing crematorium, if you look at this, these are truck containers, and they're just carrying people, and they take them out of the coffin or put them into the coffin to take them in and burn them, and then they take them. Like, the amount of just, this is at the hospitals. So this is what like emergency rooms look like. And this is the absurdity of it all, because I guarantee you, because of how China counts things and how they view face and all that stuff, there is no way deaths of Chinese people during COVID are less than 17 million already. Before this, there's just no way. Country that big with no immunity and no vaccination, and the vaccine they came up with only works on the wild type. It doesn't work with Alpha. It doesn't work with Delta. It doesn't work with Omicron. It is old-fashioned, specific to the strain. It's not an mRNA vaccine. It doesn't work. It doesn't build immunity to the other ones, especially the harsher ones. Now, Omicron has a lower death rate, but that statistic comes from, the idea that Omicron has a lower mortality rate is because so many people have either recovered and then they catch Omicron and they get minor symptoms, if any. And from that, look at this. That is just horrifying. But according to the Chinese government, no COVID deaths. These are the pharmacies. They're empty of all fever medications. They've been rationing them. And cold medicine. Everybody's out there. It's also, we now know that being febrile, having a fever, is not one of the big signs of COVID. It is, some people will get a fever from it, but not a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons why it messes with you so much is because you don't get one. But it's, I mean, this is, and look at this, is China fudging COVID numbers? Fucking please. This is absurd. And by the way, I want you to remember this, the full opening idea. This is everybody in the hospitals. This is their medical system becoming just completely overwhelmed with everybody coming in who's got, who, when they first get like cold-like symptoms, they think they recognize that it could get worse and they want to get some sort of treatment beforehand. So they're coming in and just flooding these places. And this is, oh, by the way, this is the Shanghai Baosheng Funeral Parlor. The most populated place after Christmas are not the bund, shopping malls, or restaurants, but crematoriums and funeral homes. This is just heartbreaking. And look at that. Look at this right here. The fact that these videos are even getting out are amazing. But according to the Chinese government, less than 10 people are dead. And this is, let's see. I'm guessing this is just people's personal belongings, although this person is saying, this is more than likely people who've passed and they just clear out their entire place. Hospital in Wuxi, the floors are completely covered with corpses. Crematoriums have run out of space and are overwhelmed. It's fucking terrible. And they've refused like any of the treatments that have come out. Whoa. Okay, that's, I mean, it's hard to tell from the yellow bags. That they usually use yellow bags for biological waste in people. And again, the fact that this footage is getting out is extraordinary because this stuff gets shut down super fast. So I would like to remind everyone that when you're reading the Twitter files about we should have just let it rip and doctors said it was no big deal and then yada yada, this is what you would have had in the United States and in the West if we'd have just let it rip before there was a vaccine, especially when Delta came around. Yeah, this is an entirely different one. These are all wrapped coffins. These are people who have the actual blessing of having a coffin. And those are freezer drawers. Number of people dying due to the spread of the virus in China is increasing, and they're being burned in crematoriums. 24 hours, they're just burning nonstop. And I wanted to point that out because the Twitter files that everybody is talking about right now are about about COVID. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, here you go. So this is David Zweig. Let me hold this up. This is all this stuff about the Twitter about how Twitter rigged the COVID debate and by censoring info that was true but inconvenient U.S. government policy. Which, by the way, like masking and shutdowns in response to this until you had a vaccine were the smart move. The sad part is it took Trump so long to finally come around to it. If he'd have started a month earlier, the deaths would have been way lower. Discredit doctors and other experts who disagreed. And by the way, no, they did not. Disagreeing is one thing. Saying that ivermectin will fix it is not disagreeing. It's fucking making something up out of whole cloth with no science to back it up. By suppressing ordinary users, including some sharing the CDC's own data. Yeah, ironically. Let's see. Again, by the way, CDC's own data, what does he mean by that? The masks? Masking doesn't work, which, was before they did a real study on it in April, May, June of 2020, when they're like, oh, actually, it does limit the amount of virus you're exposed to, and it does limit the exposure. So far, they focused on Twitter's secret blacklist, how the company functions, a kind of subsidiary. Yeah, this is bullshit. Yet to cover is COVID. This reporting for the Free Press, the FP is one piece of that important story. Pressure Twitter and other social media platforms to elevate certain content and suppress other content about COVID-19. Yeah, in this misguided attempt to save lives. Internal files of Twitter that I viewed while on assignment for showed that both the Trump and Biden administrations directly pressed Twitter executives to moderate the platform's pandemic content according to their wishes. Their wishes that fewer Americans would die, I think, is the idea. Even if you're misguided and you're like, you are doing best practices, and you find out later that one particular thing doesn't help. The honest belief that you were doing the best with the information you had is wholly different than their wishes. This is even true of the Trump administration, for fuck's sake. According to meeting notes, Trump administration was especially concerned about panic buying. Because he didn't want it to look like shit. They came looking for help from the tech companies to combat misinformation and runs on grocery stores, but there were runs on grocery stores. And, yeah, would it have been worse because there was hair on fire screaming? This is so fucking stupid. Wasn't just Twitter. Well, yes, we know that. When the Biden administration took over, one of their first meeting requests for Twitter executives was on COVID. The focus was on anti-vaxxer accounts, especially Alex Berenson. Right. Largely responsible for the fact that more MAGAts died than any other group in the United States after we had a vaccine. But who cares? I mean, it's just their voters, right? Said social media companies were killing people for allowing vaccine misinformation. And by the way, that's not his wishes. That's his true belief. You can argue with his true belief, but it's wholly different. Someone honestly going, this is, in my opinion, this is killing people. This is tricking them or talking them out of getting vaccinated. And a lot of these folks are going to fucking die because of it. That is not, even if it ultimately was misguided, which it wasn't, it's still best practices in good faith. And so Zweig and all these assholes saying that they were doing it to make it look like it was a control point is just fucked up. And again, read this in the context of what I just showed you in China, that these folks, Culbertson wrote that the Biden team was very angry that Twitter had not been more aggressive in deplatforming multiple accounts. They wanted Twitter to do more. Did they? No. The Biden team was not satisfied with Twitter's enforcement approach as they wanted Twitter to do more and to deplatform several accounts. Because of this dissatisfaction, we were asked to join several other calls. They were very angry in nature. Here's a presentation in Twitter team news. So what? Twitter executives did not fully capitulate to the Biden team's wishes and extensive. Okay, so again, there is no there. How many times do we have to see these fucking Twitter files? How many times? When they go, the government yelled at them and cajoled them and insisted and asked and said shall and may a lot. And then what happened? Twitter did what it thought it should do and no more. Even with James Baker working at the fucking place. This is just goofy. Same thing with the Hunter Biden laptop myth. All of it. Yeah. As COVID-19 cases rise in Boston, school and city officials are considering bringing back a mask mandate. It won't happen, Schmoopy, because ultimately it's Omicron, and that is working as a sort of form of vaccination, unlike Alpha and Delta and the wild type, which killed people. And all this stuff, you have to understand, these Zweig and these assholes are want you to think of current, like, Omicron variant, which is, again, part of the reason why it's got a lower death rate is because people have already been infected with another form, and so they get symptoms, but they don't go to the hospital. So that automatically brings it down, and they're vaccinated, so that number brings it down. And a lot of people, they're not differentiating in those statistics very much. But they want you to look at wild type, Alpha, and Delta in particular, which Delta was really deadly. They want you to look at use these, that period of time overlaid with your current experience of a largely vaccinated public responding to an outbreak of a less virulent strain. Keep in mind, though, this is what China is getting from an Omicron outbreak. Largely the breakout that you're seeing in China that's causing all their crematoriums to burn 24/7 and then and mass burials, which will be the next video you'll see. The reason, they're not saying this isn't Delta, this isn't Alpha, this isn't the wild type that's causing this. This is Omicron that is killing this many people. And by the way, the other strains aren't gone in China. They're not eradicated. The majority of people will get Omicron, but there's sort of a reverse engineering, a de-engineering that's going on, because most people in the United States had the wild type or the Alpha type, and hopefully if they got, Delta who made it through, then have an immunity that protects them from Omicron being, because it's, less virulent, their body's more adapted to handle it. The opposite is not true the other direction. If you get Omicron, that isn't necessarily going to protect you as well from Alpha and those other things. It may, but there's no measurement here. And God knows what other strains they have there and whether they're even being honest about it. Thank you, Kath. And thank you, Spiny Norma. I don't like Spiny Norman. I like it. I get it. The hedgehog. Appreciate it. So keep that in mind, that this dickhead wants you to react to this story of something practically almost 3 years ago in the same way that you would react currently, with the majority of people in the United States either having natural immunity or hybrid immunity or being vaccinated. But Twitter did suppress views, many from doctors and scientific experts, that conflicted with the official position of the White House. As a result, legitimate findings and questions that would have expanded the public debate went missing. Yes, the conversation about how much seawater you can drink was not talked about openly while everyone was in the lifeboat, because it wasn't helpful, and it was better to ration the clean water you had until you really find yourself up against the wall. This is the same thing. This asshole would argue that, if you were in a lifeboat, you could guzzle all the seawater you want because somebody once told him you could drink a cup of it and it wouldn't bother you. Much of the content moderation was conducted by bots. Right, we know this. Trained on machine learning and AI, impressive in their engineering, yet still too crude for such nuanced work. Tough shit. Your primary way of getting information should be your own doctor and maybe the news that at least vets what they're talking about, as opposed to fucking Facebook post, you dum-dum. Second, contractors in places like the Philippines also moderated content. They were given decision trees to aid in the process, but tasking non-experts to adjudicate tweets on complex topics like myocarditis and mask efficacy data. There we go, mask efficacy. He had to hit that one. Was destined for a significant error rate. That's true of everything on Twitter. It's a fucking social media platform. It is not the physician's desk reference, you dick. The fact that people were expecting to gain genuine information from social media is embarrassing in and of itself. Okay. An epidemiologist at Harvard Medical School tweeted views at odds with U.S. public health authorities and the American left and the political affiliation of nearly the entire staff at Twitter. Okay, this is his picture. No, thinking that everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. COVID vaccines are important for older, high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children. Do you think younger age groups? Okay. Also, March 15th of what year? Are we talking 2021 or are we talking 2020? Because again, pre-Delta, Delta was taking younger, healthier people. And there was this idea that if you're just young and healthy, you could just fucking shrug it off. And then we had a bunch of extremely healthy people dropping from it. And then like, yeah, but that's fairly rare. Yeah, till it's you. And by the way, at this point, he's also talking about, this is like not dealing with the mRNA vaccine, but like the Johnson & Johnson, which was directed to the original strain, as a standard one, much like the Sinovac is and isn't working because it's specific to one of the earlier strains and doesn't protect you against the later strains. And then again, Delta came along and fucked this whole conversation into a cocked hat. Internal emails show that intent to action by a moderator saying his tweet violated the company's COVID-19 misinformation policy and claim he shared false information. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Generalized knowledge from a doctor that asserts something as a certainty, which is not a certainty, especially with a new infection, is part of the problem. And the problem is that these kind of things aren't going to affect people like him, where they're like, I got no comorbidities. I take good care of myself. I've got plenty of vitamin D in my system. If I get a respiratory infection, it really won't affect me. The problem is who it will influence. And since social media has, two primary uses in the United States, one specifically is interaction, and the other one, which has become increasingly problematic, as much as I hate that word, in the last decade, is influence. In the kind of abstract, we talk about influencers, people on specifically that's like almost geared towards TikTok and Instagram, where they get you to buy a product without actually telling you to buy the product and that kind of stuff, and they get that's why there had to be so many changes about like contains paid advertising, so you'd know that this person was selling you something that they were told to sell you, not genuinely something they organically would use, for example. There are changes that had to be made in social media around that because of the impact of influencers, and there is an influence aspect of someone talking to someone who they don't realize, like, who's shrugging off getting vaccinated because of this stuff. And at that point, they were taking extra care so they don't lose customers, because ultimately social media companies, like any other company, don't want their customers dead. I suppose the only difference would be, the Republican Party, who seemed to not give a fuck and thought there was an expendable element of their electorate. Anyway, so they hammer through this stuff. Self-proclaimed public health fact checker with 18,000 followers was flagged as misleading and replies and likes disabled, even though it displayed the CDC's own data. What an excellent example of cherry picking. If you narrow it down to only specific months, you specify which can include the largest COVID wave seen across the world, and you ignore all non-disease deaths, and you ignore cancer, heart disease, SIDS, then COVID is leading. Okay, so the point they're trying to make is this isn't the part that got their shit dropped, dum-dum. This is, which is trying to lead people into, look, you're more likely to die of heart disease. That's because most people are more likely to die of heart disease. And this is lurching in front of other things. It's a wave. It was coming. Let me see. You think, let's see. Should we look at this one? Yeah. August 11th, 2022. Right on. 10:43. What? And this is, I can't see, like, that he shrunk this down, so we can't tell when this was, like, Kelly K of Georgia. Internet rando and public health fact checker focused on COVID and kids, restoring normalcy and COVID metrics in Georgia. She's gone up a couple thousand since he tweeted this. And they put misleading. Learn why health consider COVID-19 vaccine safe for most people. So the idea is that she's shrugging off COVID as no big deal. And by the way, again, we don't even know. I can't see in this from his picture where this chart came from. But the point she's trying to make is that it is a leading disease. Again, you can't even see it because it's so fucking small. And by the way, a leading disease or a leading cause of death that is not lifestyle, for example. Prosecutors compelled to release certain internal communications which show direct White House pressure on the company to take action in Berenson. 2021. How was White House? Cross fingers. Overall, pretty good. They had one really tough question about why Alex Berenson hasn't been kicked off the platform. Otherwise, their questions were pointed but fair, and mercifully, we had answers. Again, who gives a shit? There's this one. Internal records show that a bot had flagged the tweet and that it received many tattles, what the system amusingly called reports from users. That triggered a manual review by a human who, despite the tweet showing actual CDC data, nevertheless labeled it misleading. Now, this is trying to shape your thinking about this chart. That's why they did it. Were they right in doing it? Hard to say. But again, they had, like, this came from Twitter users flagging it in particular, and one of their bots that have been set up to be on the lookout for this kind of stuff, and then a human reviewed it and went, yeah, they're trying to lure you into thinking that you got nothing to worry about. You'll probably have a heart attack. Tellingly, the tweet by Kelly KGA was labeled misleading. It was a reply to a tweet that contained actual misinformation. Which is what? Here's some data. Since December of 2021, COVID has been the leading cause of death from disease in children. COVID has never been the leading cause of death from disease in children, yet the tweet remains on the platform without a misleading label. I see. So the differentiation there is like infectious disease versus heart disease. And cancer is a disease, which is not contagious. Heart disease, not contagious. SIDS, not contagious. That was the point. And they're like, if you ignore all the non-disease deaths, that's why they say death from disease in children. Also, and what they meant was contagious disease. And again, nobody's worried about their kid catching cancer from the kid that has cancer at school. Also, Twitter had every opportunity to tell the White House, both Trump and the Biden White House, to fuck off, and they did. Inconvenient. It was legitimate but inconvenient to public health established narrative about the risk of flu versus COVID in children. U.S. local wrote, influenza is more lethal than COVID-19 in children, while COVID-19 vaccination causes more serious morbidity than influenza vaccination in children. Again, that's the debatable part about this. That's the part that was up for debate. And still, they're pushing this. And is that the end of it? Does he keep going? Okay, there we go. No. And then another example of human bias run amok was the reaction to this tweet by Trump. Many Trump tweets led to extensive internal debates. This one was no different. Right, and they left it up. Who cares? Yoel Roth, Twitter's former head of trust and safety, had to explain what optimism wasn't disinformation. This is the same thing we saw before, where Yoel Roth, these guys wanted to fucking string him up. And now all of a sudden he's like their hero because they pushed back. Sometimes they pushed back, sometimes they didn't. And yet, what David Zweig and all the Trumpians and all the MAGAts want, they're all disappointed that the United States and other Western countries that have things like Twitter because you can't tweet in China. They wanted to let it rip. Why didn't we just, that's what David Zweig's argument is. Why didn't we just let it rip? I mean, you can't save everybody. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, even if those eggs are grandma, any immunocompromised people, any kids with immunodeficiency disorders, any kid who's got, repeated lung infections, asthmatics, other people who had comorbidities early on where it would trigger a reaction. These folks wanted to let it rip. Stay classy. All right, that was a side jaunt into the world of that. And hi, you're watching Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide. That ended up eating up a lot of our time. And considering I have so many goddamn clips, can we go to something that's a little... Can we just take a break and do something ridiculous now? Yeah, people who've had transplants, that's exactly right. In my province of Canada, government are not asking people to mask up. We have no children's Tylenol, no adult cough syrup, running out of over-the-counter medicines. It's a combo of flu, cold, COVID. Children's Hospital and NICUs are overwhelmed and no elective kid surgeries right now. Yeah, because of the RSV as well. It's a mix. Duh. And people did not develop, immunities to the new strains of flu and RSV over the last couple of years while they were masked up. So this is all of this is the result of COVID infecting the world. This was not optional. The masking up part wasn't optional. The secondary effect where we're catching up with our immunity on flu and RSV and those and other bronchial diseases because of our lack of exposure to them in the normal, chain of events that lead people to having regular immunity to lesser, rhinoviruses and other forms of SARS that float around. You can't skip it. This is the same people who were talking about the Twitter files about COVID and stuff are just like the economics people on CNBC or Fox Business who are talking about the economy right now without the context of COVID, without supply chains being shut down, without China being in the shape that it's in and was in and has been in, and by the way, will be in for the next decade. So get out. You can't pretend it didn't happen. Yeah, if you're just joining us, you can roll back and look at some of us, looking into the COVID rolling through China right now. And it's bad. It's really bad. And again, the folks touting the current Twitter files are basically wishing that on the United States. And keep in mind, one of the doctors that was censored that they're not going to bring up, that was kicked off Facebook and Twitter, was the woman who said that it was because living people were having sex with demons and devil sperm was causing COVID. Like, for fuck's sake. She was on Trump's team. I mean, come on. Are we just going to pretend none of that happened? We're just going to blank out 2 years of the craziness we went through. And we're going to also pretend that this isn't happening, that the let it rip theory isn't being played out in a horrifying sense in China right now.